Hello friends, I'm really glad you made it here tonight. Whatever kind of day you've had, busy, confusing, or just a lot to carry, this can be your little pause. You don't have to solve anything right now. Just get cozy, settle into a comfortable spot, and let the gentle crackle of the campfire sit in the background, while your mind starts to unwind. For tonight's story, we're quietly leaving the shore behind and stepping onto one of the great treasure ships in the fleet of Zheng He, sailing through warm seas, starlit nights, and distant ports filled with spices, colour, and soft ocean wind. When you're ready, we'll begin that journey together. Morning mist hangs over the estuary, soft and pale, as if the world is holding its breath. That is the morning your life changes. A messenger from the magistrate arrives in your village, carrying a bamboo tablet marked with the crimson seal of the Ming court. Your name is read aloud among those chosen from the coastal provinces. Men from Fujian with long histories of fishing, men from Guangdong familiar with monsoon winds, and men from the river towns of Zhejiang who grew up guiding barges through narrow channels. You are one of them. Not summoned for punishment, not for tax collection, but for service in the greatest maritime expedition ever attempted by the Empire, the voyages commanded by the eunuch admiral Zheng He. You travel to the naval garrison at Fuzhou, where recruits from 3 provinces gather in long rows. These men share the same uncertain expression you feel inside yourself, caught somewhere between pride and disbelief. An officer explains that the Emperor's command is absolute. Every man selected will serve as part of the fleet that represents the Ming to kingdoms beyond the ocean. It is considered an honor, a chance to earn steady pay, food security, protection under naval law, and reputation far beyond anything most villagers could hope for. Compared to the unpredictable earnings of fishermen or farmers, naval pay is reliable, and rations, rice, millet, dried fish, and pickled vegetables are guaranteed even in the leanest seasons. At dawn the following morning, training begins. You learn rope work first. Thick coils of hemp leave red marks across your palms as you practice knot after knot. Knots that bind sails, knots that secure crates of tribute silk, knots meant to release instantly when storms strike. Your instructors teach you to move as a formation. The Ming fleet does not sail as scattered ships, but as a coordinated arm of the Empire, each vessel keeping precise distance so that the admiral's flags and drum signals can ripple across the water like a single beating heart. You study Ming naval law every evening. The officers read the regulations aloud by lantern light, rules that seem severe but exist to protect thousands of sailors who will live together at sea for months. Stealing imperial cargo is treated as treason. Fighting on deck threatens the harmony of the fleet. Ignoring an order in dangerous weather can cost lives. But in return for obedience, the Emperor guarantees food, pay, and the right to petition through officers if a sailor is treated unjustly. On the 10th day, a chest is carried into the courtyard. Its lacquered surface gleams red and gold as the officers open it to reveal the imperial seal of command. One by one, recruits bow before it. This moment binds you to the voyage more tightly than any rope. The seal represents the Emperor's will, and swearing loyalty before it is an oath that reaches beyond any village or province. You understand, suddenly and clearly, that this journey is bigger than you, a chapter in the story of the Empire itself. Each morning afterward begins the same way. You bow toward the imperial decree mounted on a wooden plaque, as every sailor must, acknowledging the authority that guides the fleet. Afterward, officers light a small stick of incense and offer it to Madzu, protector of those who travel the sea. You join them, breathing in the faint curl of smoke, feeling yourself step slowly into the culture of the ocean. At night, when the courtyard quiets and the lanterns swing gently in the breeze, you hear more spoken about the man you will follow. They say Zheng He was trusted with the emperor's most delicate missions, that he once restored order in distant kingdoms and returned with envoys who pledged loyalty to the Ming. They say he is fair, even-tempered, and gifted with the ability to read stars and currents as if they were written text. Most of all, they say he carries the emperor's confidence more deeply than any civilian minister of the court. Serving under him is not only stable work, it is a source of pride. Weeks pass, your hands toughen, your balance steadies, your breathing quickens and slows with the rhythm of drills. One evening, your instructor announces that training is complete. You will join the fleet at Nanjing. Nothing prepares you for what you find there. The treasure ships rise from the river like mountains of carved wood. Great baotran, fitted with watertight bulkheads, layered decks, and rudders as tall as house walls. They tower over the docks, vast enough to carry hundreds of men, cargo for foreign kings, and gifts meant to awe courts across the world. Support ships surround them, grain carriers with stacked barrels of millet, water ships filled with enormous clay tanks, horse transports lined with straw, and patrol vessels armed with bows and early fire lances. Everywhere you look, the Empire is preparing to move. You step onto the gangplank of your assigned ship. The wood shifts gently beneath your feet, a quiet reminder that from now on, your life will be tied to something alive, something that moves with wind and tide. Sailors look up briefly as you pass, their expressions calm, familiar, as if they recognize the mixture of awe and nervous hope in your eyes. You walk across the deck, taking in the coils of rope, the rhythmic creak of the masts, the scent of resin and river wind. There is history beneath your feet. Craftsmanship from the Longjiang shipyards, labour from thousands of workers, the vision of an emperor who believes the world must be crossed. And as the lanterns flicker in the evening light, and the deck breathes softly with the water, you feel the truth settle quietly inside you. This voyage will not simply take you away from home. It will remake you. It will redraw the edges of the world you thought you knew. And it begins now. You reach Nanjing before dawn, and even in the half-light, you see something that steals the breath from your chest. Along the Qinhuai River lies the Longjiang shipyard, the largest, most advanced shipbuilding complex in the Ming Empire. For years, tens of thousands of workers have gathered here. Carpenters, caulkers, sawyers, smiths, rope makers, lacquer workers, and mathematicians studying naval ratios on bamboo strips. This is where the treasure ships were born. Your instructor tells you quietly that a single treasure ship requires timber from entire mountain groves. Some beams so large they were floated downriver from forests hundreds of li away. The government opened special timber routes for this very fleet, and prefectures across the empire were ordered to send skilled craftsmen to Nanjing for the sole purpose of building vessels that could cross the world. When you first see one up close, your mind refuses to accept it. The hull rises nearly 30 meters above the waterline, as tall as the city walls of Nanjing. The ship stretches more than 100 meters in length, longer than any wooden structure you have ever known. Even the escorting officers pause when they pass the stern, as if reminded that such ships were never meant to exist in silence. Your hand touches the wood, and your instructor explains that the hull is built using watertight bulkheads, a Chinese invention centuries old, but now mastered on a scale no other civilization has achieved. Each bulkhead divides the hull into sealed compartments. If the ship is pierced by coral or struck during a storm, only one compartment floods, while the others keep the vessel afloat. Western ships won't adopt this design until far, far later. Here, it is already considered standard. You step aboard, and the ship reveals even more of its anatomy. Thick crossbeams run beneath the deck, set so tightly against the hull that carpenters must slide them in at angles and hammer them flush with mallets the size of your arm. Some beams span the entire width of the ship, 5 or 6 men long. These beams, you are told, are what allow the ship to endure the twisting of waves without tearing itself apart. The sails, folded neatly along the masts, are unlike anything used in the Western world. They are made with bamboo battens, thin, flexible ribs that run horizontally across the canvas. When the wind fills them, the battens bend, absorb force, and return to shape. Chinese sailors can reef these sails quickly, adjust them with precision, and continue sailing even when the monsoon winds rise dangerously. Square sails used in the Far West cannot do this. They tear easily. They catch wind in only one direction, and they force ships to zigzag laboriously across the sea. Your fleet, by contrast, can angle its sails to catch even light breezes, travelling diagonally across the wind with surprising grace. It is another reason China commands the ocean routes. Then you see the rudder. It towers above the deck, a slab of hardwood taller than a village house, hinged with iron plates so thick you could not wrap your hands around the edges. This rudder allows the helmsman to turn a 100-meter vessel as cleanly as a smaller river junk. The mechanism is so advanced that foreign envoys have written about it with disbelief, calling it magic wood that obeys the pilot's will. Around you, the ship is alive with specialists. Carpenters check the seams, tapping each joint and listening for hollow spots that signal a plank drying too quickly. Blacksmiths sharpen chisels and fit iron nails the length of your finger. Sailmakers sit cross-legged on the deck, stitching canvas and repairing battens using needles that look more like thin bone awls. Caulkers press tung oil-soaked fibre deep into the seams, making the hull watertight. Rope makers test coils thicker than your wrist, pulling them tight across wooden frames until the tension hums low and steady. Every craft, every task, every movement aboard this ship is the result of knowledge passed down through generations of Chinese maritime work. Your officer explains that these ships dominate the seas not because of size alone, but because of engineering. The marriage of bamboo, iron, pine resin, tung oil, and hardwood into something stronger than the ocean's anger. That is when you hear it for the first time. A long, low creak that seems to ripple slowly through the hull. The officer rests his hand on the beam beside you and smiles. He tells you the ship is breathing. All wooden vessels shift with the tide, with temperature, with the weight of cargo settling in the hold. But vessels this large breathe more distinctly, a slow stretching and contracting that tells experienced sailors whether the hull is content, strained, or preparing for storm weather. You listen again. The sound is deep, resonant, almost like a sleeping animal turning in its rest. By the end of the day, you begin to distinguish the tones. The light creak when the river current changes, the faint tapping when ropes tighten, the slow, heavy sound as the hull settles into balance. You are told that anyone who serves on these ships long enough will come to recognize these sounds instinctively. Lanterns glow along the deck at dusk, casting warm circles of light across the timber. You lean on the rail, watching workers finish their final tasks before the fleet's departure. Tomorrow, the officers say, you will learn what it means to live and work on a ship this size, how the crew is organized, where you will sleep, how duties are assigned, what rations you will receive, and what routines bind 1,000 men into a single functioning body. You listen to the hull breathe again, soft and patient beneath your feet, and the ship, in its quiet, unfamiliar voice, seems to say, "You belong to the sea now." Your first full day aboard the treasure ship begins with a sound you will learn to measure your life by. A drum, deep and resonant, strikes from the upper deck, announcing the first watch of the morning. A gong answers it, its bronze ring carrying across the anchored fleet like a pulse shared between dozens of ships. This is how time is kept here, not by sun alone, but by instruments that divide each day into 5 watches of daylight and 5 watches of night, a rhythm so steady it becomes the heartbeat of the entire expedition. You gather with your assigned unit at the middeck as your supervising officers step forward. The Duhushi, responsible for discipline. The Jushi, charged with the ship's overall command. The navigators, who study stars and monsoon winds. The recorders, who keep meticulous logs of supplies and crew behaviour. And the medical officers, trained in herbs, acupuncture, and the early hygienic practices that protect sailors during long voyages. Each officer has a clearly defined authority, and every sailor knows to whom he answers. Your quarters lie deep within the hull. Wooden berths line both sides of the compartment, stacked in 2 and sometimes 3 tiers. Each berth is narrow, barely wide enough for a mat, a folded robe, and a small box for your belongings. Canvas roll-up screens offer a little privacy, but not silence. You sleep close enough to hear the ship shift, to feel the hull adjust with the tide, to sense the breathing of wood and rope, as if you lived inside the body of the vessel itself. Shifts are strict. Every sailor belongs to a rotating watch, so the ship is never unattended, even at the darkest hour before dawn, even when the sea is calm, and the only sound is the slow hiss of water against the bulkhead walls. Your first assigned duty is rope work. The middeck is piled with coils as thick as your wrist, each one essential to the raising of sails, the securing of cargo, and the anchoring of the ship. You learn the hauling rhythm, 2 pulls and a brace, a technique perfected over generations. Officers correct posture, footing, spacing, making sure your movements align with the men beside you. Nearby, the smell of food begins to drift from the galley. Breakfast is simple. Millet porridge ladled from a bronze cauldron, rice steamed in stacked wooden containers, dried fish that has been salted for months, and pickled mustard greens that provide the salt and crunch sailors crave. Ginger is chopped finely and stirred into hot water to settle stomachs before the ship begins to sail. Herbal teas made from dried tangerine peel and licorice root are prepared by the medical officers to strengthen the lungs and ease nausea. Livestock moves along the lower deck. 2 chickens clucking in a woven cage. A pair of goats tied near the stern. These animals provide fresh meat and milk on long voyages, and are tended with more care than one might expect. A sick goat, after all, means 1 fewer day of decent food. After breakfast, you witness your first weapon drill. A line of soldiers stands along the starboard walkway, bows strung and ready. Others carry crossbows, compact, precise, capable of firing in quick succession. And then the fire lances appear. Long bamboo tubes reinforced with metal, packed with gunpowder that spews flame and sends sparks arcing into the air. These weapons are not used for conquest, but to defend the fleet from pirates who have long preyed on merchant ships in the waters of Southeast Asia. Every soldier practices, every sailor watches, and no one forgets that even a peaceful mission must be prepared for danger. Once drills end, the Duhushi gathers the crew to recite the naval law. Punishment for theft of imperial cargo is severe. Sometimes exile, sometimes worse. Striking a fellow sailor earns immediate lashings. Damaging goods meant for foreign rulers is treated as sabotage of the emperor's diplomatic mission. These laws are not merely words. Recorders document every infraction. Officers enforce discipline with unwavering consistency. By midday, you begin to understand that this ship is not simply a vessel. It is a deeply ordered world, governed by rules as precise as the lines of a star chart. In the afternoon, you are assigned to help the carpenters. Inside the bulkhead compartments, they move like physicians tending to a patient, tapping beams, listening for hollow sounds that signal weakness, adjusting joints with wooden mallets that leave quick, ringing notes in the air. They explain that if one compartment takes on water, the others must hold firm, the principle that allows treasure ships to survive storms that would break smaller vessels apart. The ship rolls gently with the river current. You steady your hand on the crossbeam and feel the hull respond. It shifts, adjusts, and relaxes again. The carpenter beside you smiles and says that in time you will recognize each sound as clearly as if the ship were speaking. By evening, lanterns glow along the railings, and the smell of steamed rice and ginger fills the air. You eat with your unit, sharing the day's stories. a knot mastered, a reprimand narrowly avoided, a new skill learned. Above you, the stars begin to appear in the deepening sky. Your officer walks past and tells you quietly that tomorrow you will begin learning how the fleet finds its way across the ocean, how the compass guides the bow, how the stars become roads, how clouds and waves speak warnings that no written manual can teach. You finish your meal slowly, listening to the hull breathe beneath your feet. You feel the next lesson drawing closer. The lesson that transforms a sailor from someone who lives on a ship into someone who understands how the world itself is stitched together by currents, wind, and sky. And with that thought, you step gently into the waiting night, ready for the chapter ahead. Navigation aboard this fleet is never treated as a personal skill. It is not something a single sailor masters for his own sake. It belongs to the expedition itself, and beyond that, to the Ming court. From the first lesson, you are told plainly that every course sailed by these ships has been approved before departure. Routes are not improvised. They are calculated, debated, and sanctioned by the Emperor's command. On the flagship, navigation falls under court-appointed specialists, men selected for their training, not their bravado. They answer upward through the chain of command to Zheng He himself, and through him directly to the Yongle Emperor. That structure alone makes this fleet different. In other parts of the world, a captain decides where to sail. Here, navigation is an imperial function. The magnetic compass is introduced to you not as a marvel, but as a regulated instrument. It rests inside a wooden frame near the helm, its magnetized needle floating freely in water to reduce friction and false readings. The rim is marked with the 24 traditional directions, each one tied to known winds, currents, and seasonal routes. You are required to memorize them all, not as abstract points, but as living references, directions that correspond to coastlines, ports, and open sea crossings. The compass is checked at fixed times, at sunrise, at midday, at dusk, and during every night watch. Only designated navigators may interpret it. When a course adjustment is needed, the navigator calls it aloud. An assistant repeats the command. The helmsman responds. A recorder writes the change down immediately. These records are not optional. They are part of the fleet's purpose. Zheng He's voyages are not only journeys, they are surveys. Every mile sailed is meant to return as knowledge. At night, the compass gives way to the sky. You are taught that stars are not decoration. They are instruments. Certain constellations rise and set along predictable paths, forming what navigators call star roads. By measuring how high key stars sit above the horizon, navigators estimate latitude with trained accuracy. This is done by eye, sometimes aided by simple chords or sighting boards, but mostly by memory, reinforced through repetition. You learn which stars belong to northern waters and which appear only after the fleet sails south. When unfamiliar stars emerge, their position is noted carefully. Their behavior is compared across multiple nights. Nothing is dismissed as coincidence. If clouds hide the stars, the lesson does not stop. During daylight, you are trained to read the sky itself. Thin, stretched clouds often mean steady winds. Low, fast-moving clouds signal instability. Tall cloud towers forming on the horizon warn of storms long before thunder is heard. The sea speaks too, if you learn how to watch it. Long, even swells suggest distant weather systems. Short, choppy waves point to local wind shifts. When wave patterns cross at sharp angles, it often means competing currents below the surface. In shallower waters, the colour of the sea changes. Green where sand lies beneath, dark where depth increases suddenly. Sounding lines are lowered when approaching unfamiliar coasts. A weighted line marked at regular intervals measures depth. Mud, sand, or shell clinging to the weight tells navigators what lies below, even when the water looks calm. Sea charts are consulted constantly. They are practical documents, not illustrations. Some show coastlines and anchorages. Others mark routes measured in sailing days and watches. Reefs, shoals, and dangerous currents are inked darker than everything else. Margins are filled with notes, added during earlier voyages under Zheng He's command. Warnings, corrections, observations that prove true more than once. These charts are never considered finished. They are refined with each expedition. Recorders update logs daily. Wind direction, cloud cover, wave behaviour, compass headings, any deviation from expectation. When the fleet returns, these records will be reviewed in Nanjing, compared across ships, and used to plan future voyages. This is why Zheng He's fleet grows more confident each time it sails. It remembers. You are taught to understand the monsoon system as the true engine of the expedition. Departures are timed to ride seasonal winds westward. Returns are planned months in advance to catch their reversal eastward. Sailing against these winds is avoided whenever possible, not from fear, but from calculation. This knowledge allows the fleet to cross the Indian Ocean with a reliability that astonishes foreign observers. Even steering reflects the fleet's discipline. The massive iron-hinged rudder is never moved casually. Commands pass through the chain of authority. Adjustments are small, deliberate, meant to guide vessels longer than city streets through open ocean and crowded harbours alike. When the fleet sails in formation, course changes begin with the flagship. Signal flags rise. Drums beat prescribed rhythms. Gongs answer across the water. Dozens of ships turn together, maintaining distance and alignment, moving as a single body. And always, you are trained to trust the horizon. When fatigue blurs your senses, when fog erases landmarks, when the deck rolls beneath you without warning, the horizon remains steady. You are told to anchor your gaze there, to let your body align with it, to remember that even when everything near you moves, the world itself has not lost its order. By the time the fleet pushes fully into open sea, you understand something fundamental. This is not just a voyage. It is a system. Zheng He's fleet dominates the seas not because of size alone, but because navigation here is collective, recorded, and imperial. Because knowledge is centralized, tested, and preserved. Because every sailor, navigator, and recorder serves a single vision directed from the highest level of the empire. As you stand watch beneath unfamiliar stars, compass steady beside the helm, records being written behind you, you know your place now. You are not merely travelling, you are helping make the ocean legible to China. Ahead lie foreign ports, where these calculations will turn into ceremony, and observation will give way to diplomacy. The fleet continues west, and this time, you know exactly how it knows where it is going. The fleet does not drift into its first foreign waters like a merchant convoy. It arrives like an announcement. Before land is close enough to see clearly, the expedition's internal order tightens. Patrol vessels spread outward. Escort ships hold their lanes. The flagship stays central. This is not only for safety, it is to be witnessed. The first major foreign shore the fleet reaches is Champa, a coastline known to Chinese sailors for generations, and a kingdom that already understands the Ming tributary pattern. That is the first difference you feel. There is no confusion about who you are. Local boats do not approach like pirates or strangers. They approach like officials. The harbour grows crowded, not with trade at first, but with ceremony. The fleet anchors deliberately where the ships can be seen from shore, not tucked away, not hidden behind headlands. Treasure ships hold the centre like floating fortresses. Grain ships and water carriers anchor behind them. Patrol ships take their positions and remain there, steady, watchful, predictable. The drums and gongs do not sound randomly. They are signals. A drum pattern summons work crews. A gong pattern marks the movement of officials. Another pattern orders armed guards to posts. Even from your place on deck, you learn to hear the difference. The visit begins with control of space. No sailor steps ashore without assignment. No trade happens freely. First comes protocol. Imperial banners are raised. The ship's officers prepare a landing party that is not made of sailors alone. Court translators, recorders with brushes and registers, a security detail of soldiers, officials who carry imperial letters and ceremonial gifts. You see lacquered chests brought up from the hold, not merchant cargo, imperial gifts. Silk bolts folded in layers, some patterned, some plain but fine. Porcelain packed in straw and cloth so carefully it seems cradled. Lacquerware sealed against sea damp. Copper cash in strings. Medicinal goods and aromatics from China's interior. These are chosen for meaning. They do not say, "We wish to buy." They say, "The Ming can bestow." And when Champa's envoys arrive, they arrive with their own meaning. Their tribute goods are not random offerings. They are the region's recognized wealth. Aromatic woods, resins for incense and medicine, spices, ivory and fine local crafts. Tribute is presented formally, and immediately it becomes paperwork. Recorders write inventories. Officials inspect quality. Quantities are counted. This is one of the most important truths of the tributary system. It is not only ritual, it is administration. Tribute is recorded so it can be remembered, compared, rewarded, or questioned later. A ruler's standing is shaped not only by gesture, but by consistency. You begin to understand why the fleet brought so many recorders. This expedition is not only travelling through the world, it is measuring relationships. While officials exchange ceremony, the rest of the fleet performs a second kind of work: logistics. Fresh water is loaded continuously in large ceramic jars. Grain is replenished. Pickled vegetables are restocked. Salted fish is inspected, dried again if needed, and repacked. Livestock is replaced and reorganized. Chickens moved away from spray. Goats tethered and tended. This is not comfort. It is preparation. Carpenters inspect the hull. They tap beams, check seams, replace worn rope, patch cracks before the monsoon seas can widen them. If growth can be scraped from the hull, it is done. If rudder fittings need checking, it happens now. If sail battens must be replaced, the sailmakers work while the air is still. Champa is not only a diplomatic stop, it is a maintenance phase. When the fleet departs, it leaves not only with supplies, but with local knowledge. Pilots familiar with coastal hazards are taken aboard temporarily. Their knowledge is guarded and recorded. The fleet moves south toward Java, and the tone changes. Java is not a simple reaffirmation. It is wealth, complexity, and instability. Patrol spacing increases. Weapon inspections resume. Bows strung. Crossbows checked. Fire lances inspected. Not for conquest, for deterrence. Authority here is not singular. Delegations arrive divided. Different flags, different escorts, different claims. The fleet does not rush to choose a side. It observes. Who controls the harbour? Who can guarantee order? Who can deliver tribute on time? Here, tribute becomes evidence of governance. Officials receive tribute, but recognition is treated carefully. Gifts are prepared again, but the sequence is guarded. Recorders log not only goods, but behaviour. Delays, contradictions, requests for legitimacy. Envoys are taken aboard, not as prisoners, as petitioners. This relocates political judgment away from violence and into imperial ritual. Then the fleet turns toward Palembang, and everything changes. Palembang is not about ceremony. It is about control of sea lanes. Piracy has plagued these waters, and one name carries weight: Zheng He, a warlord, a pirate leader, a threat to the system itself. As the fleet approaches, posture hardens. Patrol ships move first. Treasure ships anchor as command centres. Soldiers stand ready, not for display, for resistance. Orders move rapidly. Signals ripple outward. Drums and gongs coordinate movement. Zheng He resists, and he loses. He is captured alive. This matters because capturing him turns the act into law, not revenge. He is transported to China, executed under imperial authority. The sea changes. Violence on these routes is now a fence against imperial order. After Palembang, fear changes direction. Merchant vessels appear more confidently. Tribute traffic resumes. Local officials approach with calculation instead of suspicion. Watch schedules remain strict, weapons maintained, but tension eases. By the time Southeast Asia lies behind you, the pattern is clear. Champa reaffirmed structure and resupplied the fleet. Java tested legitimacy and redirected it to the emperor. Palembang enforced security through decisive action. This is what makes it Zheng He's fleet. Not distance, but statecraft. When the sails rise again, familiar coasts fade behind you. Ahead lies the open Indian Ocean. Long crossings, monsoon winds, seas where discipline becomes survival. The fleet turns west, and now you understand the pattern. The voyage is not only movement, it is the construction of order, one port at a time, until even the horizon begins to feel like part of the Emperor's map. The first sign of the storm is not violence, it is wrongness. The wind fades instead of building. The sails lose their curve and hang slack against the masts. The sea smooths in a way that feels unnatural, its surface darkening until it looks thick and heavy, like oil poured across the water. The navigators do not speak loudly. They do not need to. Orders begin to move through the ship with urgency, but without panic. Drums sound once, then twice. A signal you have learned means preparation, not reaction. Sailmakers climb the rigging immediately. Bamboo battens are loosened and reefed, reducing sail area before the wind returns. This is done early, because once the storm arrives, no one will be able to move safely above deck. Below, officers call out checks. Cargo lashings are tightened again, even if they were secured the day before. Silk chests are wedged deeper between beams. Porcelain crates are padded with spare rope and cloth. Water jars are braced so they cannot roll. Livestock is moved. Chickens are shifted into tighter cages. Goats are tethered lower, closer to the ship's centerline, where rolling is less violent. This is procedure, but fear arrives anyway. The air grows thick and wet, pressing against your lungs when you breathe. The horizon fades, not into mist, but into something darker and closer, as if the sky is lowering itself toward the sea. The swell changes next. Waves that once moved in a single direction begin crossing each other sharply. The ship no longer rises and falls evenly. It twists. You feel it through the deck. A slow torque that pulls the bow and stern in different directions. Then the wind returns. Not gradually. It hits in bursts. A sudden wall of air slams into the remaining sail, snapping canvas tight with a crack like breaking wood. The ship heels hard to port, so sharply that tools skid across the deck and men drop to their knees instinctively. Drums pound now, their rhythm cutting through the roar when shouted commands no longer carry. Rain arrives sideways. It stings exposed skin, turning the deck slick within moments. Scuppers clog with debris and spill water back across the planks. Another gust hits harder. The mast groans, a deep, straining sound that travels through the hull itself. The bamboo battens bend violently, flexing instead of snapping, absorbing force that would tear rigid sails to shreds. This is why these sails were built this way. Below deck, the first report comes up. A forward compartment has taken on water. Not flooding, contained. Men are sent immediately. Buckets move hand to hand. Pumps are manned without pause. The watertight bulkheads do what they were designed to do, but only if watched constantly. A second wave crashes across the bow. It is not spray, it is weight. A solid mass of water slams onto the deck, knocking two sailors flat and sweeping loose objects toward the rail. They are hauled back by belts and sleeves before the next wave arrives. A water jar breaks free. It smashes apart instantly. Fresh water spills uselessly into the scuppers. No one stops. Water can be rationed. Time cannot. The ship rolls again, farther this time. For a heartbeat, the deck tilts so steeply your body believes the ship will not recover. Your stomach drops. Your grip tightens until your hands ache. Then the hull answers. The massive iron-hinged rudder bites into the water. The keel holds. The ship rights herself with a violent snap that throws men into beams and railings. Some cry out. Blood appears where faces meet wood. No one lets go. Darkness arrives fully. Lanterns are extinguished. Too dangerous now. The storm erases all sense of space. Lightning becomes the only light. Each flash freezes the ship for an instant. Rigging whipped sideways. Faces streaked with rain. Hands locked around rope and beam. Between flashes, there is nothing. A man slips. You hear boots scrape. A sharp intake of breath. Then absence. He goes over the side without a cry. The ship cannot turn. The sea swallows him instantly. His name will be written later. The storm continues. Carpenters work by touch, hammering wedges into straining beams, listening for changes in tone that signal danger. Smiths secure iron fittings with soaked rope to keep them from tearing loose. The hull breathes heavily now. Long groans, sharp cracks, the sound of wood flexing against forces it was never meant to meet, and somehow surviving anyway. Hours pass without shape. You do not think of time, only of holding, bracing, waiting for the next impact. Near dawn, the wind falters. Not cleanly, it surges once more, then fades enough for exhaustion to rush in all at once. Rain becomes heavy instead of violent. Waves stretch into long, rolling swells. Orders change. Damage assessment begins immediately. Sails hang in tatters along the edges, but remain usable. Several battens are broken. replaceable. Rigging is frayed. Some rope is gone entirely. Below deck, one compartment is half flooded but sealed. The ship has survived. Across the fleet, signal drums beat slowly. One ship answers, then another, then another. The formation still exists. Only when the sun rises does the scale of what you've crossed become clear. There is no land, no shelter, only open ocean in every direction. Men are counted, losses recorded without ceremony. The dead are committed to the sea. Work resumes. Because storms like this are not rare here. They are expected. And as the fleet steadies its course once more, you understand what the night has truly tested. Not courage alone, not strength alone, but whether the system Zheng He commands, engineering, discipline, hierarchy, coordination, can survive when the sea tries to tear it apart. The ships hold their line. The compass is checked. The logs resume. Ahead, foreign shores wait. Ports where rulers will see ships that have crossed the open Indian Ocean and lived. The storm has tested survival. What comes next will test what survival is worth. The voyage continues. The ocean softens as you near the Malabar coast. The swells grow rounder, the wind steadier, and the air changes. Salt still present, but threaded now with something sharper, greener, almost sweet. Spice. Long before land is visible, your nose understands where you are going. The fleet approaches Calicut, a port that sits at the centre of a world most sailors never imagine. Not the world of emperors and proclamations, but the world of cargo that moves quietly and constantly, changing hands without ever truly stopping. Here, pepper is not just a seasoning, it is a foundation. The port's wealth comes from it, and its power comes from how well it can move it. From inland growers, down rivers and roads, into coastal warehouses, and out across the Indian Ocean in every direction. When the fleet anchors offshore, Calicut does not react like a small kingdom facing an unknown force. It reacts like a capital of trade. Boats come out early, not chaotic, but organized, bearing officials, brokers, translators, and merchants who know the value of what sits inside your holds. From the deck, you see the city's edges first. Crowded shoreline, masts in the harbour, storehouses built for volume, not beauty. And behind the port itself, the structure of authority that holds it together. The ruler here is the Zamarin, the Samuthiri, a Hindu king whose influence rests on controlling the port's order and revenue, even as the harbour's daily trade is powered by a cosmopolitan web of merchants, many of them Muslim traders who operate the long-distance spice routes linking India to Arabia and East Africa. You feel it immediately in the rhythm of the harbour, different languages in the air, different styles of dress, different ways of greeting and measuring status. Yet the fleet's procedure does not bend. Imperial banners rise. The landing party is assembled with care. Translators first, recorders second, guards last. Because this is not only a visit, it is an argument made through order. Zheng He does not rush ashore. He receives envoys within the fleet's controlled space, so the first impression is not Calicut's market noise, but the Ming system itself. Disciplined ranks, controlled movement, and gifts that carry the weight of the emperor's hand. Chests come up from the hold, silks folded into clean, precise stacks, porcelain packed with the caution of people who know how far it has travelled, lacquerware sealed against damp, objects chosen because they communicate something Calicut understands immediately. This is not a private merchant mission. This is state power. Tribute is presented in return, and the port knows exactly what to offer. Pepper in quantity, other spices carefully selected, goods that can be weighed, counted, and recorded, the language of serious trade and serious diplomacy. Recorders write the inventories with steady hands, not because anyone doubts what pepper is worth, but because the Ming system runs on memory made physical, ink that can be compared later, numbers that can be judged later, relationships that can be rewarded or cooled later. Calicut's harbour is so active that it feels like the sea itself is working. Boats move in lanes. Loads transfer between vessels with practiced efficiency. And when you are assigned closer duty, guarding cargo during supervised exchange, you finally see where the spice truly lives. The warehouses. Long buildings built for storage and airflow, stacked with sacks and sealed containers. The pepper kept dry, protected, monitored. When the doors open, the scent hits like heat. Not unpleasant, overwhelming. Pepper doesn't smell like food here. It smells like money. You watch merchants check quality the way sailors check rope. By feel, by weight, by trust earned over years. Scales are watched, counts confirmed, disputes settled quickly. Calicut is a world where power moves through commerce as much as court. And yet, the Ming presence changes the balance. Not with threats, with sheer scale. Even Calicut, spice capital, must acknowledge what it means for an armada of state-backed ships to arrive with the authority to reward recognition and punish disruption along the sea lanes. Then comes the quieter reality you learn only by staying long enough. Calicut is not alone on this coast, and its neighbours are not equal in its eyes. South lies Cochin, a rival port and rival court, caught in the gravitational pull of Calicut's influence. Here, rivalry is not a detail, it shapes everything. So the fleet does what only an imperial expedition can do. It intervenes, politically, ceremonially, without occupying land. The Ming gives special recognition to Cochin and its ruler, a seal confirming status, an imperial proclamation delivered as a stone tablet, a public object meant to stand and be seen. Even a mountain is named in Ming terms, the mountain which protects the country. Geography becomes legitimacy. From the sailor's perspective, it is simple but profound. A port that feared invasion now stands under the shadow of Ming recognition. And that shadow is enough, for a time, to deter force. You watch this play out not in speeches, but in behaviour. How envoys hold themselves, how quickly they respond, how carefully they accept gifts and letters. This is tributary diplomacy as reality, not theory. Recognition flows outward. Deference flows inward. Trade continues, louder, messier beneath it all. And everywhere, maps are being built. Not only paper maps, human maps. Pilots consulted, routes described in sailing days and winds. Harbour depths discussed, reefs named, currents traced in the air with hands and arms. Recorders capture what can be captured. Distances, port conditions, abundant goods, scarce goods. Which rulers respond smoothly to ceremony, and which require careful handling. The fleet is not just visiting India. It is learning the coast as a system. When the fleet prepares to depart, Calicut does not feel like a place you passed through. It feels like a hinge, a turning point where the expedition shifts from Southeast Asian familiarity into the wider Indian Ocean world. The anchors rise. Pepper scent fades behind you, but it lingers. In your hands, in your clothes, in the ship's air. The coastline thins into the horizon. Navigators begin speaking again of open water. Not coastal sailing, but long routes ahead. The monsoon waits, and beyond it, new shores. The sea narrows as the fleet approaches Sri Lanka. Not physically, but politically. This island sits at the hinge of the Indian Ocean, between east and west, between Buddhist pilgrimage routes, Hindu kingdoms, and Muslim trading networks. Every ship that passes through these waters knows its name. Sri Lanka is not merely a port, it is a crossroads. The fleet anchors off the coast with care. Formation is tight. Patrol ships move into position earlier than usual. Here, ceremony alone is not enough. The Ming court already understands that Sri Lanka is unstable, divided among rival rulers, each claiming authority over sacred sites, trade routes, and tribute obligations. And Zheng He carries explicit instructions. This stop is not just diplomatic, it is corrective. From the deck, you see the island rise sharply. Green hills inland, temples visible even from the sea, structures that signal power rooted as much in religion as in kingship. Envoys come out to meet the fleet, but their posture is different from what you saw in Champa or Calicut. Less confidence, more calculation. The ruler who claims authority here, known to the Ming as Alagakonara, does not approach with clarity or humility. His representatives speak carefully, avoiding full acknowledgement of Ming supremacy. This is noted immediately. Imperial banners are raised anyway. Zheng He proceeds with ritual, because ritual tests intention. Imperial letters are read aloud. Gifts are prepared. Silk, porcelain, lacquerware. Objects meant to invite recognition rather than force. Tribute is requested. It does not arrive as expected. Delays mount. Excuses are offered. Meetings stretch without resolution. From the sailor's view, this means waiting. Long days of standing watch, guarding cargo, observing tension that never fully surfaces but never disappears either. Then the situation shifts. Intelligence reaches the fleet. Reports of hostile preparation inland, of troops gathering, of attempts to isolate Ming personnel on shore. Zheng He does not wait for betrayal to complete itself. The response is swift, and unlike anything you have seen so far. Landing parties are assembled. This is not ceremony. This is enforcement. Soldiers disembark in organized units. Weapons are carried openly. Commanders issue orders without raised voices. The Ming forces move inland with speed and precision, targeting not the population, but the seat of resistance. What follows is not chaos, it is overwhelming imbalance. Ming troops defeat local forces decisively. Alagaconada is captured alive, along with members of his family and court. From your position aboard ship, you do not see the battle itself. You see the result. Prisoners brought under guard, weapons stacked and secured, recorders writing late into the night. This is not conquest. No land is claimed, no governor installed. Instead, something more symbolic and more powerful happens. The captured ruler is taken aboard the fleet. He will be transported to China. This is imperial justice. By removing him from his own sacred geography and placing him physically before the Ming court, his authority is dissolved. Back in China, he will kneel before the emperor, acknowledge fault, and be released only after submission is complete. This act resonates far beyond Sri Lanka. For sailors, the meaning becomes clear quickly. The Ming fleet is not here merely to trade or to request recognition politely. It carries the authority to intervene when the tributary order is challenged. Yet even here, ritual does not disappear. Before departure, Zheng He orders offerings made at sacred sites, including temples associated with the Buddha. Acts meant to show that Ming power does not reject local belief, but stands above political disorder. Stone inscriptions are left behind, recording the fleet's presence, its offerings, and its authority. They are messages carved for permanence. As the anchors rise, Sri Lanka feels unsettled. Not conquered, not destroyed, reordered. You feel the difference in how local boats keep their distance, how envoys bow more deeply, how silence replaces negotiation. The fleet turns west again. The Indian Ocean opens wider ahead, toward Arabia and Africa, toward ports even less familiar with Chinese intervention. Behind you lies proof that Zheng He's command extends beyond ceremony. Ahead lies a different test. Not resistance, recognition. The sails fill, the formation holds, and the fleet moves on, carrying with it the knowledge that diplomacy backed by force travels farther than either alone. The sea changes again as the fleet turns northwest. The water grows warmer, the air drier, and the wind carries a sharpness that feels different from spice or rain. This is the Western Indian Ocean. Here, the sea does not belong to a single court or empire. It belongs to roots shaped by centuries of Islamic trade, pilgrimage, and law. The fleet does not enter this world blindly. Before land is sighted, officers review protocols carefully. These ports are not tributary states in the Southeast Asian sense. They are powerful commercial hubs tied to Mecca, Cairo, and beyond. Their rulers command respect not through submission, but through control of exchange. The first major approach is Aden. From the deck, you see why it matters. The harbour sits at the narrow gate between the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, a choke point through which incense, gold, textiles, and pilgrims bound for Mecca must pass. The fleet anchors with caution, not distant enough to seem timid, not close enough to feel intrusive. This balance is deliberate. In Aden, ceremony must never look like domination. Envoys approach with confidence. Their posture is upright, their greetings formal but measured. Many are Muslim scholars or officials, men accustomed to negotiating with foreign powers on equal footing. The Ming banners rise, but the landing party is smaller than in Calicut or Sri Lanka. Here, restraint is the signal. Zheng He receives envoys aboard the flagship, but without theatrical display. Imperial letters are presented respectfully. Translations are handled with care, Persian and Arabic spoken precisely. The gifts chosen for Aden are different. Silks, yes, but not ostentatious. Porcelain, but fewer pieces. Incense burners. Gold thread textiles meant to echo, not overwhelm, local expectations of prestige. In return, the tribute offered is subtle but powerful. Frankincense and myrrh, gold dust, fine horses bred for endurance, objects tied not just to wealth, but to religion and status across the Islamic world. Recorders note everything, not only quantities, but reactions. Who examines gifts closely? Who defers? Who negotiates wording? Here, diplomacy is quieter, but no less deliberate. The fleet remains in Aden long enough to understand how the port operates. Merchants control access. Scholars advise rulers. Trade follows religious calendars as much as wind patterns. Power flows differently here. There is no single court to impress. Authority is distributed among families, guilds, mosques, and trade houses. The fleet adjusts. When it departs Aden, it does so without spectacle, but with something just as valuable: acceptance. From Aden, the fleet moves toward Hormuz. If Aden is a gate, Hormuz is a jewel. The city sits on an island at the entrance to the Persian Gulf, and from the moment it appears on the horizon, you understand its reputation. Stone buildings rise sharply from the water. The harbour is crowded, not chaotic, but dense with wealth. Pearls, textiles, silver, ceramics from across the known world. Hormuz does not wait to be impressed. It expects equals. The fleet anchors in full formation this time, not to threaten, to declare parity. Zheng He's presence is unmistakable here. As a Muslim himself, his role carries additional weight. He understands the rhythms of Islamic courts, the pauses, the indirect speech, the authority of precedent. Imperial letters are delivered with care. They do not demand submission. They propose relationship. The gifts presented here are among the most carefully chosen of the voyage. Fine silks in restrained colours, porcelain selected for durability and symmetry, gold thread cloth meant for court display. In return, Hormuz offers what it is famous for: horses, tall, strong, prized in China, pearls of exceptional quality, silver and crafted metal goods, and again, the recorder's right. Not only what is exchanged, but how. Which officials negotiate? which gestures signal approval, which silence means refusal. You notice something different here. The fleet is watched closely, but without fear. Local merchants move freely. Guards are present, but relaxed. This is a world accustomed to power. For sailors, the days in Hormuz feel different. There is less tension, less waiting. You guard cargo, but also observe markets unlike any you have seen. Goods from Africa, Central Asia, Arabia, and India moving through the same narrow space. Maps are discussed constantly, not drawn openly, but described. Routes measured in sailing days, winds named, currents explained through gesture and story. Recorders capture what can be turned into numbers and directions. The rest is learned by memory. When the fleet prepares to depart Hormuz, there is no sense of unfinished business. Recognition has been exchanged, respect established. The Ming fleet has entered the Islamic maritime world without forcing hierarchy, and without being absorbed into it. This is its own kind of success. As the sails rise again, you feel the shift. The world behind you is now familiar, structured by courts, trade, and negotiation. Ahead lies something else. The African coast. Ports tied to trade, but not to imperial systems you recognize. Places where animals, not spices, will become the most valuable messengers of power. The navigators speak of new winds, new currents, and unfamiliar shorelines. The fleet turns southwest. The sea opens again. And you sense that the next landfall will challenge not how the fleet negotiates, but how it understands the world itself. The voyage continues. The air changes before the land appears. It grows drier, carrying a faint scent that is neither spice nor rain, but dust warmed by sun. The navigators notice it first. Currents shift beneath the hull, broader and steadier than those near Arabia. The swell lengthens. The water lightens in colour. This is the western edge of the Indian Ocean. When the coastline finally rises from the haze, it does not look like India or Arabia. The shore is flatter, the colours different. Paler stone, lighter sand, greens that seem tougher, more sun-shaped. This is the coast of East Africa. The fleet's first major approach is Mogadishu, a Swahili city-state known long before this voyage as a centre of trade linking Africa to Arabia and India. From the deck, you see a city built outward from the sea. Stone houses near the harbour, mosques rising above them, boats moving steadily, not startled by your arrival, but slowed by it. Mogadishu is not isolated. It belongs to the Islamic world, connected by faith, language and commerce to ports the fleet has already visited. That familiarity matters. The approach is careful, but not tense. Imperial banners rise. The landing party assembles with translators fluent in Arabic and familiar with Swahili customs shaped by centuries of exchange. Envoys come out promptly. Their posture is confident, their greetings formal, their tone measured. This is not a port that submits easily, but neither is it hostile. Tribute is offered deliberately. Gold from inland sources, ivory carved and raw, animal hides, and objects unfamiliar to you. Crafted goods shaped by African materials and aesthetics. In return, Ming gifts are presented: silk, porcelain, lacquerware, objects chosen not to overwhelm, but to signal participation in a wider world. Recorders write steadily what is offered, what is accepted, how rulers respond. You learn that in Mogadishu, wealth is not hidden. It is displayed openly in architecture, clothing, and ritual. The fleet remains long enough to understand the rhythm of the port. Merchants speak of caravan routes stretching inland, of gold traded from regions far beyond the coast, of animals brought down from highlands and plains you cannot imagine. Then the fleet moves south to Malindi. Here the reception is warmer. Malindi's ruler greets the Ming presence with enthusiasm, seeing opportunity rather than threat. The harbour is smaller, but the court is eager. This is where one of the most enduring moments of the voyage unfolds. Tribute includes animals unlike any you have seen. Horses, yes, but taller, leaner, different in build. Birds with unfamiliar calls. And then something extraordinary. A towering animal with a long neck, spotted hide, and calm, almost curious eyes. You do not know its name. Few do. The interpreters struggle. Descriptions fail. Some whisper that it resembles the qilin, a creature of Chinese tradition associated with virtue and heavenly favour. The idea spreads quickly, not as superstition, but as interpretation, a sign that this voyage has reached the farthest edges of the world the Ming imagination can hold. The animal is treated with care. It is fed carefully, sheltered from heat, assigned guards. Recorders document everything: its size, behaviour, diet. This is not a curiosity. It is a message. Malindi's ruler understands this instinctively. By offering such a creature, he is not merely giving tribute. He is sending proof of distance, of reach, of the extraordinary. In return, Ming gifts flow generously. Silk in quantity, porcelain fit for display, recognition delivered in ritual language. Malindi aligns itself openly with the Ming world order. For sailors, the days here feel different again. Less guarded, more observant. You watch African traders negotiate with Arab merchants, see how Islamic law blends with local custom, hear stories of inland journeys that last months. Maps take on a new quality here, not lines and distances alone, but stories of rivers, plateaus, and peoples that exist beyond the coast. The fleet does not go inland. It does not need to. Its presence alone has already travelled farther than its hulls ever will. When preparations begin for departure, cargo holds are rearranged carefully. Animals are secured. Tribute goods packed with exceptional care. Water and feed calculated for creatures that cannot survive neglect. The giraffe, still unnamed by most aboard, stands quietly as the ship moves, unbothered by the sway, as if it understands its role. As the fleet leaves the African coast behind, the feeling on deck is unmistakable. This is the farthest reach. Beyond this lies no port known to the Ming court, no established route, no familiar expectation of welcome. The fleet turns east again. The return journey begins, not as retreat, but as fulfillment. Behind you lies proof that the world is wider than anyone at home imagined. Ahead lies the long crossing back, months of sea, reflection, and anticipation. And when China's coastline finally rises again, it will not just be ships that return. It will be knowledge, relationships, and stories that will reshape how the empire understands itself. The sails fill, the fleet turns toward home, and the ocean, once more, opens wide. When the fleet turns east, you feel the shift immediately. There are no new ports being discussed now, no preparations for landing parties or ceremonial gifts. The work continues, but its purpose has changed. The voyage is no longer about reaching farther. It is about bringing everything back intact. Foreign envoys travel aboard your ship. You see them during daylight hours, kept within designated areas under quiet guard. They eat rations prepared for them, drink from water jars marked separately, and speak in low voices with interpreters assigned by the fleet. Their names, their homelands, and the tribute they carry are written down again and again. You understand that these men are as important as any cargo in the hold. Losing them would mean answering to the Emperor himself. The fleet reorganizes for endurance. Ships that took damage earlier now sail closer to the center of the formation. Heavier vessels take the lead when the wind allows. Navigation becomes cautious and conservative. The officers are no longer trying to impress distant courts. They are trying to ensure that every ship arrives home. Monsoon winds dictate your pace. You feel them settle into a steady pattern, pushing from behind rather than fighting the hull. The sails are trimmed to reduce strain. You hear the rigging creak differently now, not sharply, but with the slow, constant sound of long travel. Daily routines tighten instead of easing. Cargo inspections become part of your regular duty. You help lift lids from chests holding tribute goods. You check lashings, look for signs of moisture, smell for rot. The animals brought aboard in Africa and Arabia demand constant attention. You help carry feed. You refill water troughs. You learn quickly that these creatures are not curiosities. They are political proof, and their survival matters. Medical officers pass through the decks more often now. You see sailors pulled from watch rotations, not praised for endurance but ordered to rest. Fevers linger. Stomach illness comes and goes. Cuts heal slowly in the damp air. Herbal brews are prepared every day, bitter and warm, handed out without ceremony. You drink them even when you feel well, because sickness spreads fast in close quarters. The recorders never stop. You see them bent over their writing boards in calm seas and rough ones, recording headings, wind direction, crew health, disciplinary actions, and cargo condition. These are not personal journals. You know they will be read aloud later by officials who were never at sea. What is written now will decide rewards, punishments, and future assignments. Night watch feels heavier on the return. There is no anticipation of land in the near distance. Darkness stretches longer when you know the journey still has weeks to go. Drum signals mark the hours. Lanterns stay shaded. You stand at your post listening to the hull, learning its familiar sounds. You can tell when a beam shifts under load, or when the rudder answers more slowly than it should. Fatigue shows itself in small ways. A missed signal, a hand that slips, an order that needs repeating. Officers notice immediately. Ming naval law does not soften just because the voyage is long. Carelessness is treated as danger, and danger is punished. As weeks pass, signs of home return slowly. The air cools. The sun feels less harsh on your skin. The stars you learned as a boy begin to rise again in familiar patterns. You spot birds where there were none before. When you mention it quietly to another sailor, he nods without smiling. Everyone knows what it means. Rations are adjusted slightly. Cargo inspections grow more frequent. Animals are checked more carefully than ever. You help move crates closer to access points, preparing for unloading that still feels distant but inevitable. You also hear the news carried quietly through the fleet. The Yongle Emperor is dead. His successor does not favour these great voyages. Orders carried aboard the ships reflect that change. There will be no immediate preparations to sail again. When you return, the fleet will be reviewed, reduced, reassigned. This knowledge settles over the ship in a way that no storm ever did. The voyage is not opening the world outward anymore. It is closing. When the coastline of China finally becomes visible, there is no cheering. The fleet does not break formation. Entry into home waters follows the same discipline as any foreign approach. Signals pass between ships. Speed is reduced together. Anchors are prepared. You help finalize inventories. You stand watch as officials prepare reports. You see the foreign envoys gathered, ready to be transferred to court custody. Everything is orderly. Everything is measured. As the ship settles into the harbour, you realise that returning is not the same as arriving. The sea releases you slowly. There will be inspections, judgments, reassignments. Some men will be rewarded. Some will not sail again. The voyage does not end with landfall. It ends when the Empire decides what to do with those who carried it across the ocean. You step onto the deck one last time before disembarking. The ship that once felt impossibly vast now feels familiar, almost small. You know every sound it makes. Behind you lies an ocean crossed twice. Ahead lies a world that will never quite feel the same. And even before you leave the ship, you understand something clearly. You are not returning as the person who left. When the ship finally slows and the water beneath you stills, you do not rush toward the rail. You have learnt that endings arrive quietly. Officials board first, stepping onto the deck with the practiced confidence of men who belong to land. They carry seals, tablets, and written orders. Their presence changes the ship immediately. The voyage is no longer measured by wind or distance, but by lists and confirmations. You stand where you are told to stand. Cargo holds are opened one by one. Chests are unsealed. Goods gathered from across the Indian Ocean are brought up and examined. Silk, porcelain, spices, metals. Objects meant for the emperor's court. You watch hands check for damage, moisture, and loss. Each item is compared against records written weeks or months earlier. What survived the sea must now survive scrutiny. Animals are brought forward carefully. You help guide them up from below, moving slowly to keep them calm. Some look thinner than when they were loaded. Others steadier than you expected. The giraffe draws attention the moment it appears. Officials observe it closely, speaking among themselves. You hear the familiar word again, spoken softly. What once felt astonishing is now treated as proof, something to be documented and presented. Foreign envoys are escorted off the ship next. You recognize some of their faces. You have seen them pacing decks, speaking quietly with interpreters, watching the sea with expressions you learnt to read over time. Now they are guided away under guard, their journey continuing inland toward the court. Their presence aboard the fleet has shaped this return more than you realized. Only then do the officials turn their attention to you and the others. Names are called, rosters are checked, losses are confirmed. Men who did not return are accounted for in writing. There is no pause for ceremony, but there is acknowledgement. Service is measured carefully here. You answer questions when asked. Where you served, what duties you performed, what you witnessed. Your words are written down and set beside others. Truth, in this place, is consistency. Zheng He appears briefly during these days. When you see him, he is calm and formal, unchanged by the months at sea. Yet you sense that something around him has shifted. The court he returns to is not the same one that sent him out. The emperor who ordered these voyages is gone, and the world of decisions has moved forward without waiting. You hear this in fragments, quiet conversations, orders that stop short of what once felt inevitable. There will be no immediate preparations to sail again. Some ships will be dismantled, some crews reassigned, others released back into civilian life. The great movement that carried you across oceans does not end with a declaration. It ends with silence. When you are finally dismissed, it is simple. You step onto land that feels solid in a way you have almost forgotten. The ground does not move beneath you. The air smells different, less salt, more earth. Sounds arrive without echo. Even the sky feels closer. In the days that follow, the voyage begins to change shape. You hear how it will be remembered. Officials speak of tribute and diplomacy. Scholars will write of distant ports and rare animals. Records will preserve dates, names, and measurements. Stone inscriptions will remain far from here, marking where the fleet once stood. But some things stay only with you. The sound of the hull at night, the rhythm of watches marked by drums, the feeling of standing on deck with nothing but water ahead and behind. Those memories loosen their grip slowly, like the sea pulling back from shore. You don't need to hold on to the journey. It has done its work. You can let it drift into the background and give yourself permission to rest. I hope you enjoyed spending this time in the world of Zheng He's great voyages, walking the decks of the treasure ships, feeling the movement of the sea, and glimpsing a moment when the world felt vast and newly connected. I hope this journey gave you a place to wander for a while, something steady and distant enough to let the noise of the day soften, and something rich enough to linger in your thoughts if you wish. Thank you for exploring this world with me. However your night continues from here, may it be gentle, unhurried, and kind. Until next time.